So this is actually something I've been thinking about a lot recently. I currently play Fire Emblem Heroes a lot, but I used to play a lot of the older Fire Emblem games in general. So I started with the original one that started with Eliwood, Lyn, and Hector, Blazing Blade. I played Sacred Stones. I had the Japanese version of Path of Radiance. I had Radiant Dawn. I played Shadow Dragon, didn't have a chance to play New Mystery, and I did actually have a chance to play the original version of Binding Blade. And then, but when I got to Awakening, the series kind of fell flat for me. And I think I realized that it became less about the actual. I think the reason for me was that I felt that the game was half finished in terms of character development. Um, Mainly because the first portion up until when you start moving into facing Walhart, it's very well designed. All the characters have a lot more supports. Even Henry has enough as supports to make it worth working with him. But when you get to Sayri, Tiki, Flavia, Basilio, all the other characters that you get after that point, none of them seem really attached to the story. Like they were kind of put in as kind of like last minute character designs that were important for the story, but not important enough to make enough of a backstory for, not enough to make them connect with anything. So like why Sayri does not connect with Long Ku as a maybe like up to B support. There's also the aspect of neither Basilio nor Flavia actively supporting Long Ku either. It's kind of an odd thing on that one. Um, I talk about Long Ku a lot, but it's also the same with like maybe Sumia. Also, like none of the only characters that the after character support maybe are Lucina. I think takes a pretty big role. Tiki definitely has a support. I think the most I saw from was both Sayri and Tiki both having, I think, four supports each, and only one of them was the marriageable one. That one being the support with the main character, and that's when I kind of lost interest in the game. Um, and I'll admit that when I saw the Nintendo Direct with the three hopes, I really got disappointed because Three Houses is already popular enough, and while I understand the business decision to capitalize on something that's that important, I also feel like it's ignoring what was past in the game. In particular, Fire Emblem 4, the Genealogy of the Holy War. Currently, that one has had 26 years without being remade. It's been ported over to multiple different consoles, but again, those consoles are Japanese only. So at the very best, you need a Japanese account. At the very worst, you need a Japanese system. And I do honestly wonder if that would be the next. I would have thought that that would be a next game as opposed to making a uh, Warriors based sequel to Three Houses. Again, I have a feeling that that's a very low end opinion, but I officially have been burnt out by Three Houses by the amount of support that they've been getting, as well as the fact that they got a massive amount of characters from their games for Heroes. Right now, out of playable characters, I believe that there were six remaining that are not in the game, as opposed to over 30 for both 4 and 5. The only two games in the system that are in the entire franchise that aren't available to the Heroes banner. They've done multiple copies of Edelgard, Claude, Byleth, Dimitri. They've done multiple copies of both of Lysithea. They've done a couple copies of Ingrid. Yet we're still missing the full generation, a good amount of the second generation of characters from 4. We're missing. We've had Said for some time, but and we got her mother maybe about a year or two ago, but we haven't gotten Fee, the younger sister, which is an odd thing. We're also missing Diarmond, who Nana's brother. We're missing Arion, so I feel like that would have been a good GHB unit. And so just talking about that, I realized that I've been kind of like losing a lot of interest in the actual Fire Emblem series as a whole. I don't think that there needs to be a new game just yet, just because we have had multiple cases of games that were kind of looked over. I understand that people get tired of Warriors just because they push the OCs, but you're always going to push the OCs. You're always going to push the things that make the thing that makes your game different or original. But then I tried playing it was a ROM hack of Fire Emblem 6. I think it was Project Ember. And I realized what I was actively missing. I think I like the original games because they offered more constraints to what your characters could do. But also the fact that with the remake, they up the gains too. So there's a chance that you could end up with a really good Alan Lance or Boars. Remember, I noticed that Wade actually got really good, and they also decided to make the oddball brigand Gonzalez a little bit more balanced by changing it so that his level is equal in both routes, as opposed to way lower on the route where you recruit Echidna as opposed to when you recruit Bartre or Lalam versus Elfin. So, partially what I would like to see in Fire Emblem 4, I've never played it per se. I don't really like using emulators unless I absolutely have to, and even then, it kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. But what I would like to see is, instead of the large map theme, I'd like to see maybe more of either shorter maps. So instead, it's just maps that are connected through the big pieces. Like, instead of having the 12 excessively large maps, you still have the smaller maps. I know that a lot of people have said that they would prefer the large maps, and I realistically think that there's an unfair aspect about that. I do love the Knight class and General class in general, basically. I like what they can do. I like their stats. It's not that I like everything about them. I know that their movement is a pain in the butt, but I do also know that they used to be way worse, especially in 6, where all three of the knights were either, you had Boris, who you had from the start of the game, and he was kind of average. You had Barth, who was the stereotypical knight, but he sacrificed having really good strength, defense, and almost maximal out HP for absolutely poor stats all over the place. And then you had Gwendolyn, which was a level 1 unit who joined at one of the worst times in the actual game, that being at a stage where units can actively not only kill her in one shot, but the next two chapters have heavy axe units, so weapon trial weakness. It's kind of hard to validate that. Say that I would honestly say that she was the most unfortunately designed character in 6, and I do appreciate when I was looking through both the growth rates as well as the changes they made to the knight class and um the growth rates, base stats, and the fact that a lot of all the characters no longer start at level 1. They actively start at a level that's relatively high enough to promote them. The fact that Deke no longer starts at level 3 but starts at level 10 with a hero crest in his inventory, that's actually a very nice thing for me. I do admit though that having I used to always use Deke just because he had really good constitution, but now I realize that his stats are kind of like subpar. Granted, I don't usually promote units until they're at least level like 16 through 20, but that's just me. But I do feel like units should not be valuable over other units simply because of their movement type. Because knights have always been kind of like the slow movement unit type where they're always lagging behind. And in 4, that actively was one of the biggest things that actually was judgeable by what you had. You always had your mounted units taking the front row, getting all the bonus, actually getting all the XP, killing all the opponents. And then you had your archers, your on foot units taking care of the rest, and then you had your knights kind of like defending the castle or trying to get where they needed to be. And I always felt like that was not necessarily unfair. There are points to say that why Cavaliers are have disadvantages, the fact that they don't have any 30s in any stats, or the fact that they have like really even stats and everything. They're just kind of like jack of all trades. But I do feel like there should not be a validation for only valuing Cavaliers over everything else. Um, so if they, what I could also recommend is a idea through a series of games called Igdra Union, where for the giant map, you only start out with a tiny map, and then as you complete objectives through the chapter, you get a the map opens up instead. So you might start with like a very smaller area map, and then you'd move on to a bigger map for more, and so on and so forth. So that would be another thought process for the game in and of itself. I won't recommend that they look just to Igdra Union for that, but it would be an interesting idea to kind of like allow your units to speed up, because that would allow you to possibly have your units that are more combat able to compare to everyone else. Um, I have my own complaints about Fire Emblem Heroes, but I can save that for a different video. I do actively think that no unit should be unable to promote until like the last chapter, which was in Roy's case. He promoted at the very last chapter, right before you fought King Zephiel. Or like, so basically like the very last chapter he promoted. Or you could always look at it as instead he promoted at the last 3 chapters. So it's fighting Bronya, Jan, and Jan in his multiple versions, and then finally Idun. And then I like the fact that it sounds like they upped what Idun could do, despite the fact that, especially because in the fact that she was one of the easiest bosses to beat. It's kind of like you fight King Zephiel, range 1 to 2, can't crit him, can't steal can't steal the item that's making that way, and he has a massive HP bar, so you have to really just whittle him down. Then you have Bronya, so a stage where you have to deal with a lot of long range hitters. And then after that, you deal with dragons, and I feel like the dragon idea with Jan, he's recovered from a wound, but he's not at full capacity. So he's easily dispatchable. But again, that's penultimate boss, so realistically, I would prefer a little bit more of a challenge. But Idun as the final boss should not be finishable in 1 round by your main character at level 1, just because the sword that he has is really good. So I guess for me, what I would really hope to see is either, if I was to see a brand new game into the series, I would realistically hope that they would add something more to the series, like go back to kind of like the roots of it. I do, of course, love skills, but I don't like the fact that that all the skills are class related. So instead of using, say, 3 houses or awakening fates, excuse me, you do more something akin to either, I don't know if Echoes had weapon based skills. I think that would be interesting, but I kind of always loved Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawns. You choose whatever skills you want, and then they take up a certain amount of capacity. I mean, that may not have been the best option, but it would be definitely interesting. And then also, I do like the idea of having hub towns for like right before a stage that you need to go on. I think Echoes did it really well, where you travel along, you got items, you talk to villagers for trades or possible weapons, you recruited characters that way. I do think that was interesting. I think the other thing about Awakening was that out of everyone that was recruitable in the main cast, so I'm not including kid characters, Gaius was the only one that was enemy original. So he's the only character that you recruit as a enemy character, and then I believe it's You can recruit you recruit Cynthia as an enemy. You can't recruit Selena until you can recruit Selena, but you can't unless you if you kill the specific soldier that she talks with. She isn't recruitable. Let's see. I'm trying to remember what else there was. I know that Kedgel and Jerome were not that way. They were extra units. I'm just going off based on memory. I don't have any real notes on where they were. I guess to suffice, I did get tired with the aspect of Fire Emblem becoming more and more like a dating sim game where the main goal was to um, make relationships as opposed to the main story kind of being crushed. Um, so I do kind of hope that they also. I do kind of think that having for 6, 7, and 8, having that limitation of just 5 supports per game does make it very, very hard to complete it. But at least it allows for way more replay value. Not that I really know. I never actually completed any real support conversations except maybe a support for Joshua and Natasha. That was about it. But that's my personal thought process, and thanks for listening.